Meanwhile, there are concerns the American economy is headed for a recession, which could bring down global growth.
Trump introduced punitive tariffs on China, as well as trying to rebalance the trade deficit to try and contain China's economic rise.
The US dollar is facing a backlash. The forefront of this is BRICS. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
In 2018, the Trump administration discovered that the US had a massive trade deficit compared to China's trade surplus. For some reason, the Trump administration pointed the blame at China. That was the beginning of a trade war between the two global powers, which has now escalated to a Cold War propelled by differing ideologies. The interesting thing is that this war is not stopping anytime soon, because President Trump is returning for a second term, and he has promised that he would go tough on China with sanctions and tariffs. But the question is, will Trump's strategy help to reduce America's trade deficit? Will it bring back manufacturing from China to the United States? And most importantly, who will bear the brunt of the sanctions, China or America? Let's find out. To begin, let's talk about the US-China trade. In recent decades, trade between the US and China has grown massively. Today, it is one of the largest export markets for US goods and services, and the United States is the top export market for China. This trade has brought lower prices to US consumers and higher profits for American corporations. This is the reason why, despite what anyone says, the fact is that American corporations are not on board with the US government's plan to impose tariffs on China. Now, according to reports, the US has been sharply increasing its trade with China every single year. This can be confirmed by the consistency in the total value of monthly imports and exports between the US and China. So, what does this tell you? It tells you that despite all the talks coming from Washington, nothing has changed. The US is still trading with China like never before. The question is why? Well, you can trace the answer to the mindset of many US companies regarding China. The mainstream media platforms might portray China in a negative light, which is all part of the government's plan, but American companies view China differently. According to a report published by the American Chamber of Commerce in China, more than 90% of US companies regard China as one of the most important investment destinations, and 75% plan to reinvest in China. This is because China is on a path toward reinventing technologies with the capacity to control the future. It's no wonder then that the EU has begun to demand technology transfers from Chinese companies. However, the irony is that for decades, it was China that was finding ways to transfer technology from the West. It was actually a core part of China's development policy. But now the roles are reversed. Interestingly, this is one of the reasons why Trump initially imposed tariffs on Chinese goods back in 2018. The Trump administration cited intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and unfair trade practices by China. Anyway, the point is that China learned what it needed to learn from the West and has begun to reinvent it. And now the West is trying to figure out ways to transfer technology from China. Some people might say that China is just a copycat, but American companies know better, and that is why they are setting up their manufacturing in China. You see, most people think that the reason why American or any other foreign company sets up their manufacturing in China is because of cheap labor. Well, that's wrong. As the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook said, China stopped being a low labor cost country years ago, and the reason why companies are set up in China is because of the level of skills the country possesses. Think about it. If it was about cheap labor, wouldn't India be a preferable location to build factories? Of course it would, but companies aren't scrambling to build factories and manufacturing hubs in India. They are doing it in China. This is because China has skilled laborers and the infrastructures that are necessary for growth. However, there is another major reason why China is the future, at least in terms of manufacturing. Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel so that you can get more videos like this. In case you are not aware, the world is gradually shifting towards green energy. Green energy has become a core part of the policies of so many countries, including the US. This also means that manufacturing is shifting towards green energy as well. So, green energy technology and innovation, including solar panels, wind turbines, and electric vehicles, will be at the forefront. Now, when it comes to green energy, it is China, and not the US, that is the powerhouse. China is dominating this sector, and its control over these technologies is not just significant, but also a game changer. The reason for this is that the majority of the crucial rare earth minerals needed for green energy transition are located in China. In simple words, China has a monopoly, and you know what that means. Interestingly, China recently used its monopoly of these minerals to counter the US sanctions and tariffs. If you can recall, the US launched several attacks on China's semiconductor industry in an attempt to curb China's technological advancements. The recent attack entailed a new set of export controls, restricting the sale of crucial semiconductor manufacturing equipment and high-bandwidth computer memory to China. In response, China banned the outright sale of a number of materials crucial for the production of semiconductors and electric vehicle batteries to the US. This includes the sale of gallium, germanium, antimony, and other super-hard materials, all of which are essential materials in the production of semiconductors. So you can see how China just countered the US attack. As one Chinese leader said back in 1987, the Middle East has oil, but China has rare earth. Rare earth reserves are scattered around the globe, but China possesses 40% of the global rare earth supply. And in terms of extraction, 70% of it is mined in China. This is a very huge advantage. But it gets better. China doesn't only own the entire supply chain, it also has the most talent and research in the field. And don't forget that this is something that is the future of the world. Interestingly, reports show that China is producing the most amount of STEM graduates in science, engineering, technology, and mathematics. In addition to this, China has an outsized dominance in mining and mineral engineering. In fact, out of the top 10 positions in the global ranking, Chinese universities occupy the top 6. The US, on the other hand, doesn't have a single university in the top 15. With this, it is very easy to see why China is and will continue to be the dominant force in high-end manufacturing. You can understand why American companies prefer to set up factories and manufacturing industries in China. But here is a very important question. If China is this valuable and important, why do US politicians keep viewing China as a threat? Why does Western media keep painting China in a negative light? I mean, is it a crime for a country to develop and surpass another country? The fact is that contrary to what the media wants you to believe, China has played a tremendous role in the growth of the US economy. And this is the reason why US companies are reluctant to say goodbye to manufacturing in China. As I said earlier, American companies are starting to recognize the superior technology coming from China, but they are now faced with two choices. One, try to compete with China and overtake them at a significant cost. Or two, leave the market and simply become their customer. The CEO of Ford Motors, Jim Farley, realized this after spending a significant amount of time in China. When he returned to the US, he had to make a crucial decision because he realized that his company faced an existential threat in China as a result of China's advancement in the EV industry. The fact is that China's electric vehicle technology is way ahead of its counterparts in the West. Now, despite the tariffs blocking Chinese EVs from entering the US, Ford predicted that it stood a chance of losing $5 billion on its electric vehicles. So the solution was to pivot its strategies and take subsidies from the US government to make batteries in the US. But get this, Ford plans to license the battery technology from the world's largest maker of electric vehicles, China's KTL. What does this tell you? US companies cannot do without China. The recent moves made by Apple, one of America's most valuable brands, further butters this point. Recent reports suggest that Apple is moving closer to China, despite the current tariffs and sanctions levied on China by the US. According to the report, Apple is increasing its use of parts from Chinese suppliers and manufacturing sites at the same time. It's reducing its supply from Taiwan, the US, Japan, and Korea. Apple also announced at the beginning of the year that it plans to expand its research center to Shanghai in China. All these points at one glaring truth that US politicians have refused to see for some reason: the 21st century belongs to China. The reason for this is that China has spent decades investing and building a world-class network of infrastructures that is conducive for companies' manufacturing and that no other country can compete with. From fully automated ports to high-speed rail networks, China's infrastructure and facilities are second to none. In addition to this, China has been spending the last decade building alliances and an extensive trade network with the China Belt and Road Initiative. This initiative has been joined by over 150 countries, making it the world's largest and most extensive trading network. This not only cements China's position as the world's factory, but also ensures that products made in China will be seamlessly transported and distributed globally. This right here is the reason why the US sanctions will hurt the US economy more than it will hurt China. Unlike China, the US does not have an extensive trade network globally. China has been the largest consumer of US products, so blocking exports to China doesn't even make any sense because it will take time to build trade relations with other countries that can replace China. The fact is that the cards are stacked pretty heavily against the US. The smart thing to do would have been to adopt some of China's trade policies to catch up, or simply allow American consumers access to affordable but quality Chinese products. However, for some reasons best known to them, the US government decided to use tariffs targeted towards China to address trade deficits, which was a really bad idea. Economists would tell you that trade deficits are not a good indicator of the state of the economy. But besides that, they would also tell you that the US trade imbalances have been largely driven by soaring US federal budget deficits, which have little to do with China. But it seems the Trump administration didn't listen to a sound economist, and he went ahead to launch the trade war. The Biden administration took over the mantle, and over the course of 8 years, the trade war with China continued. But here is a big question. Did the tariffs against China work to reduce the US deficit? Or stop US companies from setting up manufacturing in China? The answer is no. The US deficit is still on the increase and factories have not been relocated to the US. The only thing that the tariffs have succeeded in doing is shifting the burden to ordinary American consumers. With the tariffs, American consumers would have to buy a product that they could previously buy at an affordable price for a higher one. In simple terms, the biggest losers in this war between the US and China are American consumers. It's baffling that US politicians say they want to protect American consumers, yet they have not gotten this simple fact. Hopefully, they do soon. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video.